before we begin, I want to personally tell you that you in particular were a real star in your Harkness discussions. I can tell you on several occasions when Mrs. Wiseman, our board president, was in there, she would say, the first time she said, "Who is that young lady?" I said, "Holly Cornett." And then she became very fascinated with every discussion that you took part in. You are a remarkable young woman. So tonight is your thesis presentation, and we want to tell you that we've started every senior this way by saying you made it, you've gotten here, and so we want to applaud you just at the beginning to start that. So Mr. Simpers will say a short prayer for you, and as soon as he's finished, boom, you're on.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We are thankful that these seniors have gone through what they've had to go through to present. We thank you for Holly, for her faithfulness and diligence with this topic and with the previous topic as well. We thank you for how she's taken the edits and gone back and fixed things and researched even more deeply and gotten progressively more passionate about her subject and more knowledgeable. We thank you for her gifts and her eloquence and her steadiness, and we pray that you would continue to bless her with every good thing as she presents this thesis here tonight. We thank you for your love and your mercy to us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Hello, my name is Holly Cornett, and the title of my paper is The Astronomical Importance of Private Space Exploration. Before I talk about my thesis and its proofs, I'd first like to go over some necessary background information. Some recent scientific advances to be aware of going into my paper are fusion energy, which is a clean energy source which uses tritium, which is a form of helium, as a fuel source, and tritium is found in both seawater and in greater quantities in moon dust. And fusion is currently possible in labs, but it is not yet a viable source of energy because it takes more energy to keep the reaction going than the energy the reaction puts out. Robotics advancements have also been made in recent years, things like self-driving cars and more advanced rovers, and these advancements could mean that missions into space could be made entirely to be automatic and not risk any more human personnel. 3D printing has also become much more advanced in recent years, and one company, Relativity Space, actually plans to use 3D printing to print rockets, which is certainly a larger project than has ever been done before with 3D printing. Orbital flight is also very important. It is similar to regular flight, but it takes place at a much higher altitude, essentially in orbit, and it saves fuel and reaches destinations faster with much less air traffic. There's also a company called SpaceX, which has been catching and reusing rockets, which saves a lot of money when it comes to having to rebuild rockets versus catching and reusing them. So there are three main companies that I will be talking about throughout my paper: Relativity Space, Virgin Orbit, and SpaceX. You've heard me mention two of these: Relativity Space with 3D printing, and SpaceX with catching and reusing rockets. Virgin Orbit is an orbital spaceflight company which intends to use jets in orbital spaceflight and sell tickets similar to regular flight. My thesis statement is, private space exploration is worth the commercial resource expenditure. There are three proofs for this thesis. Extraplanetary research furthers our understanding of the universe, space missions create many economic opportunities, and space exploration allows us to better care for our planet. Private space exploration is worth the commercial resource expenditure because extraplanetary research furthers our understanding of the universe. Low gravity and vacuum-based research conducted off-planet is vital to our understanding of biological and physical phenomena. Telescopes in orbit allow scientists to observe phenomena not otherwise visible through the lens of our atmosphere, and weather and atmosphere research, also conducted in orbit, allows scientists both to better understand the exact mechanisms of Earth's weather and to predict day-to-day weather patterns. Private space exploration is worth the commercial resource expenditure because space missions create many economic opportunities. The building of the rockets, as well as the maintenance and operation of the missions, creates many new job opportunities, expanding markets and aiding the overall economy. According to the source, NASA aims stimulates economy with jobs innovation, written by Brian Dunbar in collaboration with NASA. In 2009, NASA's Ames Research Facility generated 5,300 jobs and $877 million in economic revenue in San Francisco alone. The study found that nationally, NASA's Ames Research Facility supports more than 8,400 jobs and generates $1.3 billion in annual economic activity. The missions these rockets would go on could, in turn, produce many new commodities for existing economic fields. The raw materials found in space would also be able to be used to manufacture these new products, as well as to aid existing manufacturing companies and boost the supply from many resources. Private space exploration is worth the commercial resource expenditure because space exploration allows us to better care for the Earth. Continued space exploration requires us to advance our understanding of clean energy sources, such as solar panels on satellites and fuel cells used in rockets. These advancements are available back on Earth and allow for cleaner, more efficient energy sources to be made available to the public. The source of tritium on the moon could push scientists to increase their research toward a sustainable source of fusion energy, something that is often predicted to be the cleanest source in the next 50 years. Extraplanetary drilling could allow us to have an entirely off-world manufacturing process, which would be much more eco-friendly than the current ones we use in order to drill into the Earth's crust. Some believe that private space exploration is not worth the commercial resource expenditure. They believe that extraplanetary endeavors are too risky and expensive to be worth the resources. One trip to the moon is worth as much as $750 million, according to some estimates, and some companies charge even more exorbitant prices. With SpaceX and Chinese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa's partnership to take artists to the moon estimated to cost up to $10 billion. Space is risky, with small fires causing major problems, and increased radiation in space posing a major danger to any personnel on board spacecraft. These arguments are inadequate. Planes started out very dangerous, but today they are a casual risk which many individuals take every day. If we continue to invest in space travel, we will learn more and more about spaceflight, and rockets will become safer and safer. As of 2018, the likelihood of death by plane crash was 1 in 205,552. For comparison, the likelihood of death as a cyclist is 1 in 4,050. Flying is roughly 50 times less likely to kill someone than cycling, less than a century after the invention of the airplane. Although it is certainly very dangerous as of today, spaceflight will likely follow the same course, becoming safer and safer as time goes on, research is done, and lessons are learned. As we invest in spaceflight, it will likely become less and less expensive as well. Yusaku Maezawa's trip to the moon could cost up to $10 billion, simply because he is also investing in the development of a new type of rocket in order to reach the moon. This investment will make similar trips much less expensive, as these developmental data points will be available to the companies after those initial investments are made. Prices will go down, and the general public will be able to use these same rockets for a fraction of the price. Just like how phones and computers went from a rare commodity to a common household device in less than a century. Private space exploration is worth the commercial resource expenditure because extraplanetary research furthers our understanding of the universe. It allows us to better care for our planet, and space missions create many economic opportunities. This topic matters because it deeply affects the US economy, and therefore the world by extension. These new economic breakthroughs, if they are funded, could provide new jobs, improve existing careers, and help the global environment. If they are not funded, however, none of that will have the opportunity to happen. My name is Holly Cornett, and this has been a summary of my thesis, a paper entitled The Astronomical Importance of Space Exploration. Thank you for your time. Does anyone have any questions? Thanks, buddy.
Love it.
I just enjoyed this paper so much, and I learned so much about it. And I have about 6 things I wanted to ask you about, because it just piqued my interest so much. And like the Diary of the Space Zucchini, I thought that was adorable. And I never got the connection of how the whole green concept be linked to space. And I saw your examples here, and I thought that was very, very interesting. The aerogel, I never heard of it, and that was really amazing to me, that something that could be that strong and could be used, you know, I imagine we'll use it here on Earth as well. And the one thing though I have been concerned about with the whole space program is something that you commented on page 22. You talked about the Outer Space Treaty. And I was just wondering how that works with all the countries that are on Earth. And it says here it prohibits the installation of military bases and weapons of mass destruction off planet. That's something that I've always been a little concerned about who gets, you know, control of whatever that is out there, and whether they would be able to become, you know, a force for evil to the rest of us. Could you address that at all?
So the Outer Space Treaty essentially is agreed upon internationally by, I forget the name of it, but not the UN, but the collaboration of various different countries that I believe we're still part of. It essentially states that no military personnel can be in space for a military mission, and you can't put weapons into space, exactly for that reason, because many were concerned about exactly that. It also states that no one country can claim territory outside of planet Earth, so all other planets are essentially considered international waters. Companies that are from, say, SpaceX from America can say they own the rocket. If you land the rocket on Mars, say, as soon as you step onto the rocket, you are on technically American territory, but as soon as you step onto actual land outside of that rocket, you are no longer in any one country's territory. So that territory is limited only to installations like satellites and rockets. And it keeps exactly what you're worried about. It keeps that from happening because no one country is allowed to claim territory and no country is allowed to place military personnel in space. So no one can really threaten anyone else. It's entirely required to be public missions, peaceful entirely.
And you said that China plans to travel to the moon and build a base. Do they have to get permission from that community in order to do that, or are they just doing that on their own?
I don't believe so. There are various national laws. I know the US has a long list of national laws that you have to follow, but I don't believe that all countries have to follow that. It's more if you want to take a boating trip out into international waters, not everyone has to agree country-wise. You just have to get permission from your one country to say, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to, say, sell fish from international waters. So it's similar to that.
So basically, China doesn't need anybody's permission to do that.
As long as they obey the International Outer Space Treaty, yes.
So you had a lot of great points in here, Holly. I liked learning about the clean energy, the new products, and new jobs that could then transition into new economies, and just, you said, in terms of impacting daily life, such as better prediction of weather patterns and all of that. So those were good and informative. And I do have a question, because you did talk a bit about, in your paper, the 5 greatest dangers to humans. So that included radiation, isolation, distance from Earth, gravity fields, and all of those can contribute to life-threatening cancer, depression and anxiety, muscle decay. So my question is, knowing that those are possible issues, is there a way that we can adequately prepare humans on all of those areas to be able to, I guess, safely travel, and who bears that cost? How much does that cost? Who bears that cost? Has anybody looked into that? So that way we can say, yes, we're sending people out there, but we're going to ensure that they are going to be as protected as possible.
So there is a long list of regulations that NASA and other space companies have to obey, which state things like how the rocket is built in order to keep people safe, what the regulations are for people who are piloting rockets and things like that. And I know NASA in particular has done a lot of research when it comes to keeping people safe in space. There was a study done where they placed one set of twins on both Earth and the ISS at the same time. And they studied the exact effects of how much muscle decay there was, how the twin reacted mentally, emotionally, and physically in being in space for, I believe, 2 years. And they've used that data in order to figure out how to keep people as safe as possible. There's definitely a lot of measures that they've taken in recent years in order to keep people safe, like the types of exercise that you are required to do on the ISS. They have resistance bands and things like that in order to keep muscles active rather than letting them decay in zero gravity. things like that. They make sure to have larger crews, as large as possible within the constraints of price, in order to keep people interacting with each other. They try to have plants on board because that helps. So things like that, they do their best to keep everyone safe. I know there's a long list of regulations when it comes to that. They do a lot of emotional and mental screening before they let anyone get onto a rocket and go into space. But there definitely still has to be a lot more research done, especially when it comes to radiation and things like that.
Thank you.
Good answer.
I had a question, somewhat related. I was curious if you have any thoughts about the newly appointed, I guess, or set up Space Force, U.S. Space Force, and whether that might impact, how that might impact the commercialization of space.
I definitely found it very interesting because, as far as I'm aware, it's somewhat in partnership with a military group, which, considering the Outer Space Treaty, doesn't really make sense to me. I don't understand how that is going to work long term if you aren't allowed to put military-based installations in space, but it's in partnership with the military. So I don't see that panning out if it stays the way that it is, but I do certainly think it's interesting. If it ends up functioning similar to NASA, then I think that commercial space exploration and governmental space exploration will likely continue to develop side by side as they have been.
Thank you.
Holly, has this research that you've done swayed at all your direction for study in college?
I actually chose this topic because I already wanted to study it in college, so I am a huge fan of everything space related, and I'd like to study aerospace engineering in college and help build the rockets that I talk about in my paper. So if anything, it made me more excited to study things in college.
Nice job. Yeah. Very good. Great job. And you're rocking that lipstick, I'm just gonna say.
She's started working that lipstick.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, that's your.
Sweet.
You're good. You're
Thank
good
you.
to go.
You guys are gonna exit after this